name is Jose. I work with First Generation Initiatives, and today we have our second week for grad school days. Today we have a workshop called How to Pay for Grad School, and the presenters today are Samantha Borrego and Tisha Townsend. So, without further ado, please introduce yourselves, and everyone, welcome to the workshop. I'll before I go, I will click. I will put in the sign-in link in the chat. So please sign in, and take it away, Sam and Tish.
Um, Tisha is actually the one who's going to be presenting, and for some reason, I'm not able to mute people right now. So if you all can just remember to press mute on your screens. It's at the bottom. If you like hover over the bottom, you can just press the button mute, and that way it keeps noise to a minimum. But you can unmute if you have a question and then put questions in the chat box, which you can also find at the bottom of your screen. Thanks, Jose. Thanks, Tisha.
Yeah, and if you're a TRIO participant, please make sure to sign that Qualtrics link that Jose put in the chat so that way I can make sure to count your participation. And then if you have any questions as we go, you can either put them in the chat or you can, I'll pause for questions just to make sure, and then you can unmute yourself and ask your question because I want to make sure that I'm clear on what I'm saying. Okay. Do y'all see my little chat window or my little face window? I'm just going to minimize that for right now. Okay, so we're going to talk about how to pay for grad school. Okay, so grad school can be expensive, which is in my experience in talking with students, one of the number one reasons that some students hesitate to go to grad school because it can be it can be expensive depending on what kind of program you're trying to get into. There's a variety of different ways aside from student loans that you can explore for paying for grad school. Something that I think is important for a lot of students to know is that particularly with some of you with higher GPAs and maybe some work experience in your field, or maybe those of you who have done research in your field, might be a little bit more competitive and might be better positioned to shop your degrees. And so when I talk about shopping your degree, I'm talking about like shop your degree like you would shop for a car. And I'm going to explain some more what that looks like. Okay, so when I talk about shopping your degree, I'm talking about, not only looking at a program that has, like say an emphasis in an area that you are interested in, but what kind of options do they have? Are they going to offer you in order to help you fund your degree? And so you really have to take initiative and ask these types of questions. Like, you don't want to say like, well, what are you going to do for me? There's ways to phrase it. But you really want to explore like what kind of opportunities that these programs offer their students or might be offering a student like you in particular, depending on, like I said, your GPA or if you have research or work experience. What kind of things are they going to offer you to help you fund your degree? So in doing so, something that is helpful to be aware of is the skills and values that you bring to the institution. So, might be like, yeah, I have all this research experience. It's not something that I need to be trained on. Can I, is there somebody that I can work with on campus, like a professor I can work with doing similar research? Is there any funding opportunity within being able to do that type of research for it? So being able to also kind of sell yourself, like I think when you're exploring graduate programs, you should expect them to try to sell themselves to you. And when you are looking for funding sources, you also have to recognize that you have to kind of sell yourself a little bit too, in order to be able to have those options available to you. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions about that before I go on? Okay. Okay, so when we talk about ways that schools will possibly pay you to attend, Um, what I'm talking about is getting teaching, like you can work as a TA. I know the program that I'm in right now, I go to CU Denver, my major is Spanish. A possible option for funding I have is to get a teaching assistantship. So I would work as a teaching assistant for one of the professors, help them with research or grading or whatever that particular professor needs help with. Sometimes these teaching assistantships or research assistantships or work assistantships offer a cost of living stipend as well. Again, it depends on how competitive of a student are you, what your background is, and what kind of resources that particular program has available. Some um, some institutions have tuition reimbursement if you work for them. So again, if I were to get a job doing what I'm currently doing, but at CU Denver, they actually pay. So I'm working as a professional, say theoretically, at UC Denver, working as an academic advisor. Say they actually pay for 3 classes a year of your graduate program. So that is different because, not only am I, um, getting a salaried position there, but I'm also getting, um, tuition reimbursement, which is actually a pretty good deal. I'm not saying I'm considering it because I love my job, but it is very tempting. Um, let's see, getting an internship. So a lot of programs will offer internships that you will apply for upon acceptance into a particular program. Some of these internships are paid, some of them are not. There's a variety of funding options that this looks like. It could be that you have a cost of living stipend. It could mean that you have a small that you are getting paid, but it's I've seen some that are pay very very small amounts for a semester's worth of work. It really just depends on again the program that you are applying to and what resources they have available, because a lot of private institutions have very wealthy donors. Like DU is a perfect example of this. DU has largely a lot of their funding comes from very wealthy donors who designate scholarship opportunities for students. They get to determine, there might be scholarships out there for immigrant students. I know that they have something set up for them. They might have something that they want to pay for women in certain fields, or that they want to pay for a certain demographic of students. And so the donors get to determine, what demographic of student gets qualified for those scholarships and the amounts. They determine like, oh well, we'll pay for so many students each year, this amount, and so on. So you really, sometimes private institutions might have more opportunities like that available than public institutions. Like when I say private versus public, DU is a private institution, Metropolitan is a public institution. So, we do have some donors, but we don't have them on the level that DU does. And certainly, we don't have the same opportunity to help our students fund their degrees as DU. So that's something to take into consideration. So in addition to that, private institutions are typically going to have higher cost of tuition, but you might be able to get a better deal through scholarship and other aid that might be available. Some I know when I spent a brief time in a graduate program at DU, some of their internships were tied to being able to live on campus for free. So they have student housing, and they had certain positions that they reserved for their for interns or for their TAs. Some of those you also might get a small cost of living stipend, but some of them you do not. It really just depends. You may qualify for fellowships, which are merit-based academic awards. These are ones that you have to apply for. Some might be offered through your institutions, but some you have to apply for separately. So you have to, you can just like Google like what kind of merit-based, or when you're applying to a program, ask what kind of merit-based academic awards they have available at your institution, and they should be able to tell you that. And again, I think I just repeated myself, but getting a job at the university that you are attending, they may offer a cost of what do you call it? A tuition stipend. Tuition reimbursement is what I'm trying to say. Any questions before I continue on?
So, Tisha, we have some questions. The first one comes from Sam. How do I make myself competitive?
Yeah, so this is where it's really important to have a good GPA. I'm going to tell you a story about a student. I work with Trio. One of our, he was a student worker of ours. This particular student was undocumented. So unfortunately, we were unable to have him into our program. Um, but he tutored for us, and this kid was brilliant. I mean, his major was chemistry, and he had a 4.0. If you have a 4.0 in chemistry, like you're working really hard, but it was very something that came very natural to him. He graduated and he wanted to either go to Mines or go to DU. So he went to talk to both universities. Mines wasn't really offering him a whole lot. I think they offered him like a small scholarship, but they didn't have a lot that they were offering him for whatever reason. I'm not really sure. DU, on the other hand, offered him a teaching assistantship. He got a monthly stipend, and he got a scholarship, an almost full ride scholarship. And so he, works on campus. He's doing research with the professors that he's working with, and he's probably going to get a job teaching there. I wouldn't be surprised if he graduated, or even, who knows, maybe before he graduates. I wouldn't be surprised if you were offered a job at that institution, because he is very smart, and an institution like DU wants students like that. So you gotta, your GPA does matter, particularly when you're getting into grad school, and it can sometimes determine what kind of scholarships you are being offered. Not always, but sometimes it can.
What if I have a low GPA? Are there other ways to stand out?
Yeah, I mean, if you're involved in any research, that might be something that can help you. I have students currently that don't have, and I'm thinking in science fields, some of the more competitive fields, they don't have the best GPAs, but they have a lot of research experience behind them. If you happen to work in your field, that might be helpful, because you are going to need to submit a resume in your application. So I mean, it really depends on the competitiveness of your program. Some programs with a low GPA, you're probably just not going to get in. And I'm talking about, say a nursing program. You got to have a high GPA. It is super, super competitive. Um, I think our nursing program at Metro, they let in, I think, 25 students a year. And I think they have over 200 that apply. That's super competitive. Um, you may, if you have a low GPA, you may be admitted on a probationary period. I know somebody, one of my coworkers, didn't have like the best GPA. It wasn't awful, but it was definitely below their minimum threshold. And this person got admitted on a like probationary period, and you just have to, show that you can do the work, which they were able to do and have since graduated from that program. But like I said, it really depends from institution to institution what kind of um, aid is going to be available for you, particularly if you don't have the best GPA. There may or may not be a lot offered to you. If anything, you might, I know I got a scholarship, and I think partial was because I had a decent GPA at a 3.75, but also like my income was low. And so I got pretty decent when I applied to DU, I got a pretty decent scholarship. Any other questions?
Yes, and then another question that we have is how far do letters of recommendation go? How about previous work experience count?
Yes, all of that is really important, particularly if your work experience is relevant to the degree that you are going to be trying to pursue. You want to also have a good letter of recommendation. Uh, you want somebody that can really sing your praises of like, wow, this person, is an excellent student. I've seen them work really hard. I've seen the research that they've done, say if that's something that you're into, or because I think you'll have to have most programs, you have to have at least one letter of recommendation from a professor, and then one professional, and sometimes they require a third one. But you want to have good letters of recommendation because that is definitely going to help boost your chances of getting into a program in the first place, and then possibly exploring any other options for funding. Other questions?
I
Okay.
think we're good.
All right, let me carry on. So, when we're talking about shopping your degree, you want to be strategic. You, particularly if you're, I don't want to keep saying particularly if you're a competitive student, like if you have a good GPA, but you do, at the end of the day, I'm gonna be a little bit honest with you here. At the end of the day, most programs, a lot of programs, when they see students wanting to apply for their programs, they see dollar signs, right? You represent a chunk of money coming into their institution. So you want your institution, first off, always speak with advisors and professors from that department, from the particular program that you're applying for, because you want to know, what you're getting yourself into. Don't rely just on the internet for research when you're researching programs, if you can. And if you're out of state, that might not be an option for you, but even talk on the phone with them if possible, because you want to see what do their programs look like, what do they have to offer you, and you want to let them know that you're keeping your options open. You might even want to list some other institutions that you're looking into, like, yeah, I'm looking into this particular program. How do you know how it compares? And ask them, be very upfront, like say, hey, I'm looking for ways that a program can help me fund my degree. What can you do? Um what kind of aid are you able to offer me, in order to be able to attend this program? um it's super, super, super important. Like, don't be afraid to say that. Like, they expect you to ask those types of questions, so it's not like, I don't know, I think sometimes students might feel embarrassed, like saying, hey, like, well, what are you going to do for me, because that's kind of what you're saying, but without using those exact words. But you really, really have to advocate for yourself. So one way to phrase this idea of like, well, what are you going to do for me, is to say, this is what I'm interested in, or this is what I'm looking for. How can we make this work? So, like I said, it may involve you moving to another state. Be like, look, I'm moving from out of state. I'm a little concerned about the cost of living. Do you have any jobs that I can work on campus where I would be provided housing? If that is something that you are looking for, if you're interested in living on campus but can't afford to actually pay for it, you want to say, I'm interested in getting a teaching assistantship. Do you offer any that are paid? Be very specific about what it is that you are looking for. And just as a side note, like, you don't have to be interested in teaching to get teaching assistantship. It could be literally just a way for you to help fund your degree. You might learn some things along the way, and it's also good to have on your resume. But keep in mind, like, you're looking for opportunities to help you pay for your degree, and sometimes that means giving a little something to get a little something. um, and then my last bullet point here, you might want to say something like, I'm really interested in your program, but I'm concerned about the cost of living or tuition. Is there anything that your program can do to help with this? And they may be able to help you explore these options. They might have to refer you to financial aid, depending on, I know my particular department has no idea outside of teaching assistantships, like what kind of options for funding are available. That's just the nature of my particular program. It's a one-person program, essentially. So their involvement in all the ins and outs are very limited. But you really have to, um, you know, be polite, but be upfront about what it is that you are looking for. And, it doesn't also hurt to say, like, say that student that I was talking to you about, he could very well, and I actually think he did, because he met with DU first. He met with DU first, but he really wanted to go to Mines. And so he met with DU and got this like great offer, but he wasn't like, it wasn't his first choice. So he went to Mines and was like, well, this is what DU is going to offer me. You know, can you offer me anything similar? And he was told no, that they didn't have, you know, I'm not really sure why, because I think that they had the money. I think they maybe I can't even begin to say why they didn't give him the same offer. And so that was the deciding factor for him. He was like, well, you know, as somebody who is undocumented, you know, his options for helping pay for his degree are limited. And so he took the better deal. And I think he's, you know, quite happy with the decision. He's having a really, you know, a great experience doing what he loves doing already, and getting paid for it. So do I have any questions right now?
Yes, we had a question earlier that asked about assistantships. So, how do I let schools know that I'm interested in assistantships?
So some programs will have that built into their acceptance. Like, so for example, when I applied to DU, the particular program that I applied for, part of your admissions was an opportunity to apply for a number of assistantships. And so you were given, once you were admitted, you're given the list of assistantships, and then you sent in your resumes to apply for those. And then those people on the other end would then either pull your resume for an interview or not. And so they had a day scheduled for interviews. um, I'm sorry, what was the question? Because I went on a tangent and I forgot the question.
The question was asking, how do I let schools know that I am interested in assistantships?
You tell them. You tell them, I want to work on campus. What kind of opportunities do you have for me to work on campus? And this is where it might be helpful for you to be strategic, because sometimes working an assistantship means that you might be working for very little, or that it's going to be tied to some kind of you know, a small amount of tuition reimbursement or housing. Alternately, so this is what a lot of people at a lot of my coworkers at DU did. They got jobs at DU with their bachelor's degree, and then they use the tuition reimbursement. So you have to weigh, you know, one, will I be able to get an actual paying salary job at DU? That may or may not be an option for you depending on your experience. You know, you really have to explore what your options are. But you know, you just have to be very upfront when you are applying to grad school. You have to be very upfront on many levels. What kind of experience are you looking to have? What do you want your educational experience to look like? What do you want your interaction with your professors to look like? What opportunities do you want to be available to you? You have to do your research, talk to people, know what it is that you're looking for, and to tell them and say, hey, can you offer me this? I'm interested in doing research. I want to work very closely with my professors. Are the class sizes manageable to be able to do that? Do I have those opportunities available to me? Who can I talk to see if I can work with this particular professor? If you want to do research with a professor, say, do research on the professors in those programs, and then talk to those people and say, hey, I'm interested in what you're working on. I'm thinking about applying to a program. If I get in, can we work together? You really have to know, and you might not be interested in any of that, right? But you really, you know, whatever it is that you're looking for within your degree, once you're applying to a master's program, you probably should have somewhat of an idea, because that will help guide you if you know, if you have no idea what you want to do for your job, say, you might not should be applying to a graduate program, because you may end up doing work that that particular program is completely irrelevant, which may or may not serve you. Does that
Another,
make sense?
yes. Another question that we have, Tisha, is asking about aid. So, what types of aid are the best or give the most money?
It varies by institution. You don't have access to Pell, Pell being the free money that you are offered with your bachelor's degree. So essentially, what you are reliant upon is student loans, which you have to pay back, and any scholarship opportunity that that particular program slash institution has available for you. And it's going to vary by every institution. Um, like I said, at when I went to DU, I was offered opportunity for assistantships. I actually didn't get any of the ones that I applied for which was very fortunate for me in hindsight. Um, but I was offered a, pretty decent scholarship at CU Denver because I did not complete that program. It was not a good fit for me. So I stopped going, and I am currently in the Masters of Spanish at CU Denver. The only opportunities they offer are teaching assistantship, or if I were to get a job on campus, like I said, if I were to work as an advisor on their campus, then I would get tuition reimbursement. And that's really all that they have to offer. So it really, really just depends. And that's why you got to do your research.
Another question that we have is, if you do get offered a scholarship, is it by the semester or for the whole academic year?
It's usually by, I want to say it's usually throughout the course of your degree. So when I got my scholarship, I was given a package that was going to be divvied up throughout the course of my degree. So kind of like, like we do every semester except for your entire degree. And it depends also, you might have I mean, some scholarships have stipulations tied to them. So again, it varies and you have to do your research. I saw a raised hand. Do you want to unmute yourself? Was that an accident? Something came up that somebody raised their hand, so I just want to make sure. I'm going to go on, but feel free to speak up or put it in the chat. Do I have any more questions before I move on?
Yes. How about thoughts on disclosing disability status?
You should, I mean, here's the thing. Depending on what your disability is, you may or may not need access to accommodations, right? Because I know there's some students that have disabilities that don't feel like they need, that feel that they do just fine without accommodations. But if you need accommodations, you need to know that the institution that you're going to be going to is going to be able to provide you with those accommodations. Let me give you an example. At DU, they have an accessibility center, much like Metro does. You have to pay for their services. They're not free. You have to pay for them. So there's that. Additionally, we have there's a number of deaf students on that campus. They have to schedule their own, they have to find and schedule their own sign language, what do they call them? Interpreters, sign language interpreters is what I think they're called. That was really difficult because if there's events, like even for events, they don't automatically provide those for events. If you wanted to go to an event, because I had a deaf student in my class and she was telling us about this. If she wanted to go to any events on campus, she had to find her own interpreter. So if she just happened to stumble upon an event, she may not even be able to participate because she may not be able to find an interpreter for the event. And so that's an accessibility issue. And that's kind of really, uh, to me, that's a huge accessibility issue. And if your institution does not have, like, it depends on what your disability is, thinking about, I'm just using DU as an example. Their accessibility office is in a building that has one elevator that is frequently out of service. The accessibility office is on the 4th floor. So if you need to access that office and you can't take the stairs and the elevator is not working, you hope you can get your needs met over the phone, which may or may not be it, depending on what you need. So you really want to explore, uh, what do their services look like? Because that can cause problems for you and make it very difficult. It's already difficult navigating a world with a disability, a world that's not made for you. It's not set up for you. The streets, I can name a number of things, even on our own campus, unfortunately, snow days are worse, particularly if you use a motorized, I always want to call it a car because one of my students uses a motorized device and she calls it a car. And so it's just stuck with me. But if you use like a motorized wheelchair, for example, snow days on our campus are the worst. You can't get across campus. So you really want to look into what that's another thing that you really need to explore. I hope that answered that question. Any other questions?
No more questions, but Sam did say that um, part of what you were saying earlier about the programs that have assistantships as part of as part of the application process, and others you have to find it to apply separately.
Yeah, and just because, I'll say it again, just because they're offered doesn't mean that you're gonna get one. So, like for me, like I said, I applied for, I think, 4 different ones and I didn't get any of them. Which, in hindsight, I'm not upset about, but I remember being kind of nervous about that at the time because I'm like, wow, like I'm not even gonna, get that little bit of money or whatever the, different offices, like I said, different offices had different deals attached to them. So, um, okay, I'm gonna go on about scholarships really quick. Um, so depending on your program, again, you might be offered scholarships or grant money, but it really just varies. Um, Some some programs automatically apply scholarships to your account. Others you're gonna have to find on your own, like some of the merit-based ones, like, oh, what are they called? Dang it. Let me see. I think I might have put a link. I did. I did put a link because I'm gonna. Oh wait, no, that's not what that link was for. There's some merit-based scholarships that you can apply for, and there's names of them, and you can apply for them, and there's a handful that you can take to different institutions for you, but you have to apply for them on your own. Your institution may or may not even suggest that you apply for them. So again, you have to do your research and be like, okay, what are things that I can just take, what are things I can apply for that I can take to any institution? And then what are those, that particular institution, what are they going to offer me and what does it look like? Um, yeah, so I already spoke to this. You know, don't just look at programs, websites, and decide, oh, that's the program I'm going to apply for. If you can visit them, if you can't visit them, call them to have a conversation because, you know, it may make, where you go to school may make a difference in the trajectory of your career, the kind of, knowledge that you're going to be gaining to be able to apply to your career. Um, for me, for example, my Spanish degree isn't gonna, you know, it's really just a piece of paper. So I can say that I have a master's degree, but I work in a field that's more flexible. So I'm able to do that. I can study really whatever I want. And if I have a master's degree, it's still going to open doors for me. But you really, really, really want to research, multiple aspects of your program. Do I have any questions?
Yes, you do have one question. Um, if it comes down to it, should choose settle on a program school that offers more money or cheaper and maybe not be the best fit. What do you think?
Sam, are you trying to say something? Did you want to unmute yourself?
Oh, I was just affirming that was a good question.
Okay.
Yeah, I can answer some if you want me to.
I mean, feel free to jump in if you have thoughts on that.
Well, in my opinion, you should, and we kind of talked about this yesterday, but I think that you should go with the better fit. Um, and if the other school is offering you more money, then I I think that that's the better choice. But going through grad school, you need a lot of support. And so if you don't feel like the program is the best fit in terms of the faculty members don't seem that supportive or inclusive or whatever it is, or the students, you just got this like off vibe from them, I feel like that's a sign that you're not going to be happy and you're not going to have the people to like cheer you through the process, and that's really important to have. So I would choose a better fit over the cheaper option.
Yeah, and then I think, just based on my own experience when I graduated in spring 2017 from Metro and then I went straight into my master's program at DU. I didn't choose that program because I thought it was a more practical fit. I was getting advice that this was going to be something that would really help elevate my career, which wasn't incorrect. That was, good advice. However, it wasn't a good fit for me. I wasn't enjoying the program. My undergrad was in Spanish, and it was something I felt very passionate about, and I had always thought that I would just continue to explore that. But I was like, well, what am I going to do with a Spanish degree? Well, come to find out, in my field, it doesn't really matter what my master's is in. I probably, would have had a lot to gain from that higher education program that I was in at DU, but I hated it. I hated everything about that program. To be perfectly honest, I had my advisor, who also was a professor of mine, was very supportive of me. Um, but I did not have a good time. My classmates, I don't want to talk smack about, I just had a really not enjoyable experience. I didn't feel like I belonged. My current program at CU Denver in Spanish, oh my gosh, like my first few weeks, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I have been missing. Like the experience of like enjoying what I'm studying, because I really enjoy what I'm studying. I'm very passionate about like, the language and, the ways that we go about studying language in that program. And my professor, said something really reaffirming, because I was having some doubts. And he's like, Tisha, he's like, you belong in this program. Like you're performing at the level that you should be. And he didn't know that I needed to hear that, but I so needed to hear, like, I get choked up thinking about it even now. Um, because that, further reaffirms that I did make the right decision, that yes, I chose the wrong program in the first place for, a multiple reasons, but I decided to not pursue that path any further, and I changed my path. And I'm having a really great experience and loving what I'm doing. And so choose what you love. Always choose what you love. That's my advice. Any other questions?
Yes. One question that we have from Lily is, she says that she's looking at CESU for her master's in counseling, and it requires doing a lot of internship hours, 1,200 hours with 48 credits. For someone who wants to work on campus or do assistantships, what's the best to balance all that?
Um, you know, I don't know. That's a tough one, because that is a lot of hours. But chances are, I don't know if you've looked at other programs, you might be required to do. I think you're required for most programs to do counseling. I know that DU has a counseling program, and they actually have a community counseling center on their campus that their students do their hours in. I don't know if you happen to look into that program. You may want to, because that might be. I don't know what the clinical hours at UC Denver look like, but if it's on campus, it might be more manageable for you, because you're like going from class to to do your hours, and that, lack of commute time, and having the flexibility of that might work better for you. Um, but something that we talked about with grad school is like, man, you got to put boundaries on your time, and you're going to probably work really hard for a long time, depending on the length of your program. And you're going to have to make sacrifices. And that's going to mean not spending as much time with family, not spending as much time with friends, not spending as much time with your partners. And these people are going to have to support you through that. They're going to have to understand the time and the effort that you have to put into your program, because it's no joke. Particularly, I would imagine, for that type of a program, it's very rigorous. The type of work that you're going to have to be doing, the type of reading, lots of writing, lots of research projects, um, and it's going to be hard, but you have to make the sacrifices in order to be successful and make it happen. Sam?
Yeah, and I'm familiar with that program at CSU because it was one of the ones I considered applying to, but then decided to do the higher ed program instead. Um, but they do have a counseling center on campus, and they do have hours that you can do there with their health center. And then also there's opportunity if there's leftover assistantships from the higher ed program, they then sometimes offer them to the students in the counseling program because there's different tracks of the counseling program. And I think with balancing time, one thing I didn't know that I'm just going to say is that full time, like graduate credits, looks different than it does in undergrad. And so in undergrad, you know that 12 or more is considered full time, but in graduate level work, 9 or more is considered full time. And so you'll be taking a little bit less classes. And I think that in my experience, my program also, I had to do an assistantship and I had to do, we didn't call them internships, but it was called, I don't remember, something that's another word for internships. But um, I just tried to balance my time throughout the week so I could do both. And it did mean maybe sleeping less hours. It did mean not going out or doing many fun things. And like Tisha was saying, the balance, but I think it is possible. And it was really heavy in the 2 semesters that I did it, but I really loved both my assistantship and the internship type thing. Oh, it's called a practicum. That's what it's called. I love my practicum. And I think that there's ways that you can just communicate with both positions, that you're in both positions. And so how can you balance your time and incorporate all the responsibilities for both roles?
I'm just going to move on to the next 2 slides here because I want to be mindful of time and I want to be mindful of being able to answer everybody's questions. But I have 2 more slides I want to get information to you really quick. In addition to all the other opportunities for funding your degree that I have talked about, there are some companies that will pay for your degree. And so I just did a really quick Google search. I think I searched companies that will pay for a graduate degree, I think is what I Googled. And so then it gave me, this is one of the things, and there might be more than this than are listed in this particular article. It looks like UPS, Publix, Wells Fargo, Smuckers, Comcast, and they're all different, right? So look at Smuckers, 100% reimbursement of tuition costs. Comcast, 5,750 per calendar year, which really isn't a lot when we're talking about grad school. But hey, it's something. And if you're working for Comcast and that's in line with the type of work that you want to do, and then you're, say studying marketing or something, that might be a good deal for you. Starbucks, Verizon, Bank of America, Oracle, Fidelity, looks like AT&T, Walmart, Chipotle, McDonald's. And so these are a few companies that will pay for your degree. So it's also something to keep in mind as you graduate with your bachelor's degree and begin to, sorry, let me get back to my, how do I get back? Hold on. Give me a second. Technology, it's hard. Let me do this really quick. Okay. As you graduate, hold on a second. Why is it doing that? Can you see my screen? There we go. So as you graduate with your bachelor's degrees and you start considering, looking for jobs out, entry-level jobs within your field of interest, something to ask your employers is, do you offer tuition reimbursement? That may or may not be a deciding factor for you if you're, whether you're going to work for a certain company or not. But that's something to shop too. Don't just shop your bachelor's degree, but when you're shopping your jobs, when you're looking for a job, like what kind of benefits package do they offer? What kind of health insurance? Those are also important things. What kind of tuition reimbursement do you offer? Those are important questions to ask as well. So keep that in mind. So just as a note, as I mentioned earlier, let me make this smaller. Pell Grants are not available to help you pay for your graduate degree. You have to rely on what your institution has available to you by way of scholarship. You'll have access to student loans, of course. That may or may not be an option for you. You may or may not want to do that. and you really just want to ask like, hey, I'm concerned about this cost of tuition is really high for you or for me. What kind of scholarship packages do you offer? You just want to ask that, and I think that's it. What kind of questions do we have?
One question that we have from Nicole is, does the reputation of a university matter?
I think it depends on what you're going into, and you also have to weigh that against, so what is the field that you're going into? Because if you're going to medical school or law school, it kind of does. Secondly, are you a competitive student that you can afford to be picky about your institution? Because I know some students that, I had thinking of one student that wanted to go to school for physical therapy, but did not have the best GPA. And quite honestly, just was not able to get into the program that they wanted to. They would have been able to get into smaller, less uh, notable programs, and that's an option for them. But it really just depends on what field you're trying to get in and what you're trying to do with it. I mean, if you're, say, I know Jose, we've talked about maybe doing research, right? And so you want to look at an institution that is really research heavy and that has some professors that are doing some serious work and getting published. And if and my understanding is, Jose, that you probably are a competitive student and you might be able to afford to be picky about that. But sometimes we have a hard time with our degrees and we don't have the best GPAs, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that we can't get into grad school. It might mean our options are a little bit more limited, but there's still options. What else?
How about if do you believe that if getting yourself involved in extracurriculum activities would be able to help you?
I mean, I think if you can, not all students have that option. And I think if you're one of the students that is able to do that, that's stuff that you'll add on your resume. And it looks good. Some institutions, might view that favorably, depending on what kind of stuff that you're involved in. I think if you're looking to use that to boost your competitiveness in applying for applications, you want to make sure the stuff that you're getting involved in is stuff either related to your career that you're going to choose, or that it's going to give you the skills to help elevate you in the career that you will eventually be working in. Like if you're interested in politics, get involved in student government, run for student government, be involved in, political clubs on campus. And so that way, when you're applying to grad programs, they're like, oh yeah, this person's already active and knows what it's like to be involved. Not being able to do so, I don't want to say that it necessarily hurts you, because there may be reasons why, like, say if you're a single parent and you have to work and you're also going to school, like that's something that you might write about in your personal statement when you're applying to a program, explaining, I wasn't able to be really involved in campus, if that's what that program is looking for, and explain this is why. As a single parent, I've had to, I'm just using this as an example, pay my way through school. I had to support my family. And so I wasn't able to get that true college experience. And this is why this personal experience has led me to choose this particular career path in this particular university. You have to be able to tie it all together. I hope that's helpful. I kind of threw in some extra tips in there, but I hope that answers that question. Any other questions? I hope that was helpful for y'all. Just, as you I'm thinking of a few students, and I was telling Sam about this recently. I had one student in particular who came into my office and just thought they were going to apply to a grad program and hadn't really researched it a whole lot, didn't know that they had to take the GRE, didn't know that there's GPA minimums that you have to meet. Um, just as a side note on that note, I know that DU, and I'm thinking of their counseling, one of their counseling programs, they are kind of flexible, even though they are kind of a competitive university, they are flexible. They will admit a lot of students on a, uh, what's that word that I used? temporary basis to see if you can like, do the work. Sorry, I like I went on a tangent and then I distracted myself. Do your research is the point I think that I was trying to make.
Can I make a comment about the GPA thing?
Yeah.
So if any of you are in the situation where you don't have the greatest GPA, a lot of programs will accept you. I think you are going for conditional admittance. And then some programs will also let you be like a guest student. And so you don't really get like financial aid and you have to pay for the class on your own, but you're still able to get into the class without applying to the program, do well in the class as well as possible, and demonstrating that you can handle the rigor of the graduate level program then can help you in boosting your application, so that okay, maybe they didn't have the greatest undergraduate degree GPA, but they've done really well in these two classes that they've done. And so it can just help you make your application a little bit better if you're in that kind of situation. So I just wanted to mention that. And
Yeah, and I think sorry.
oh, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
No.
No, and I think, if you are in that position, go talk to that program, talk to an advisor or a faculty member in that program and say, hey, I don't have the best GPA. What are my odds of getting in? What kind of students are you looking for? How can I make myself more competitive? Can you admit me on I forgot the term they use again, temporary basis, whatever. You know, but I remembered what I was saying earlier, make sure that you are not just relying on, quick internet searches. Oh, there's a program I think I'm interested in. Like you really want to do the research for it and talk. Like I cannot stress that enough because nothing scares me more than to see those students who just, oh, I heard about this program. It sounds like interesting. And I haven't even looked at the classes that are offered because you want to see what types of classes are offered. Who are the professors teaching these classes? What kind of research are those professors doing? Because that's going to dictate what your professors are researching and writing about. That's what you're going to be studying. My professor, he talks about this one author. Oh my gosh, every day he pulls up interviews because he's interviewed this one writer. I don't even know who this guy is, but he talks about him all the damn time. But so you're going to be learning what your professors are interested in, like their particular areas of interest, more likely than not. So you got to make sure that that's in alignment with your interests too.
We do have a question from Linda. It says, where can I find cost of GREs and where to take? Google. I am worried I won't test well on that, but grades pretty good, so hopefully I would be fine. So
Yeah, so the GRE, it's like 200 and some dollars. You can do a Google search. Let me do one really quick for you.
Yeah, that's what I started doing.
Yeah. So, oh my God, I hate this technology sometimes. I'm sorry. Let me get rid of this presentation. You want to, sorry, the GRE. You have to pay for each time that you retake it. So keep that in mind. So typically you want to plan out, $160, it looks like generally, this is, you want to find out where can you take it here in Denver, because that's good to know. I think we offer it somewhere on, I want to say CCD. They have a testing center on their campus, if I'm not mistaken. It's going to look a little bit different right now, but you can just look up where to take the GRE in Denver. You want to plan, most students for the GRE, and I'm talking even like the LSAT and other, you want to give yourself 6 months to a year of study time before taking the test. Some people have just like taken the test and very rare instances like pass it the first time, but that is a hard test, the GRE in particular. I only know about it because I avoided it. I made sure to apply to programs that did not require it because I'm not a good test taker. But if you look at even the language parts, language is a strength of mine. and there's words on that test I have no idea. They're not in common usage. They don't have Latin roots, so you can't break up the word parts to try to decipher what it means. Um, Difficult words, and I'm, I know I don't always sound like it, but I actually have a very good vocabulary. I've always been a good reader. Literature is like my area of interest, and it's hard, and that's just the language part, and that's something I'm good at. There's like, some math on there, like forget about it. I personally, I would never have passed it, but you want to give yourself 6 months to a year to study for the GRE, and the LSAT probably, I imagine probably a year. And when I'm saying study, not like once a week, I'm saying you want to put aside a couple days, a couple hours, um, a few times a week, at a time to study for it, like you would a class.
I think one important thing to consider is that different programs weigh the GRE more or less heavy. And so you might consider some programs where that's not the most important thing, but instead your work experience or your extracurricular involvement, letters of rec, personal statement, those things are heavily or more heavily weighted than the GRE or some of the other exams that you have to take. And a lot of programs are getting rid of the GRE as a requirement. And then not all programs do require a test. That was the reason why I chose the program that I did, is because I didn't have to take it for my PhD. I've been having to study for the GRE, but not all programs need it.
And you could take practice tests. I think Kaplan offers, if I'm not mistaken, but you could also, again, just Google GRE practice tests, where you can take practice tests to see, where you're at, what you need to study on. Yeah, so.
Well, we are at 11. So I think if there aren't any other questions, we'll probably end the call. So thank you, Tisha, for another great presentation.